It was a regular Thursday afternoon when Elvis Presley walked into Charlie's Records on B Street, wearing his plainest clothes and no sunglasses. What he saw in the display window stopped him cold, his own signature, being sold for more money than most Memphis families earned in a month. The store clerk had no idea who was about to walk through that door. Memphis in the summer of 1965 was hot and humid. Elvis had been driving through his old neighborhood feeling nostalgic. He was dressed in a simple white t-shirt, blue jeans, and a baseball cap pulled low. No jewelry, no flashy clothes, nothing that would make anyone look twice. Something made him pull over that day at Charlie's Records. Maybe it was the vintage guitar in the window, or maybe the memories of hours spent in places like this as a kid, flipping through records he couldn't afford. As Elvis walked closer to the storefront, he saw it. There in a locked glass display case, right in the center of the window, was an album with his face on it. But it wasn't the album itself that caught his attention. It was the signature scrolled across the cover in black ink. His signature. And beneath it, a small white card with a price that made him stop in his tracks. $500. $500 in 1965 was serious money. It was more than most working families in Memphis earned in a month. It was more than his own daddy had made in half a year back when Elvis was growing up. And here it was, attached to something he'd signed for free. Elvis stood there for a long moment, staring at that album through the glass. He remembered signing it, though he couldn't recall the exact day or place. There had been so many signatures over the years, so many faces that blurred together. But something about seeing his own handwriting on display, like that being sold like a commodity, made him feel strange. Not angry exactly, just curious. The bell chimed as Elvis stepped inside. The shop was cluttered with records stacked in crates and posters everywhere. Behind the counter sat a young man with long sideburns and a cigarette dangling from his lips. He glanced up briefly, nodded, and went back to his magazine. Elvis wandered the aisles, running his fingers along record spines, then gravitated back toward that locked case. "See something you like?" The clerk called out from behind the counter. Elvis pointed at the display case. "That Elvis album, the signed one. Where'd you get it?" The clerk stood and walked over, keys jangling. He looked proud. "That's the crown jewel of this store," he said, unlocking the case. "Genuine Elvis Presley signature, authenticated. Got it from an estate sale 3 months ago. Soon as I saw this, I knew it was special." Elvis reached out, but the clerk pulled back slightly. "Careful, this baby's worth more than most cars on this street." $500, Elvis said. $550, actually. Raised it last week. Got a guy from New York offering $600 sight unseen. The clerk admired it like art. Signed in 1957, right after Elvis's first Ed Sullivan show. This is pure history. Elvis took the album, studying his own signature. The ink had faded slightly, but it was unmistakably his. "You an Elvis fan?" the clerk asked. "You could say that," Elvis replied, not looking up from the album. "Yeah, me too. Well, I mean, not like crazy or nothing, but I respect what the cat did for music, you know? Changed everything. Though, I got to say, his new stuff ain't quite the same as the old days. Those early Sun records, man. That was the real deal. Before Hollywood got hold of him." Elvis nodded slowly, still examining the album. "You ever wonder what kind of person Elvis signed this for? Why they wanted his autograph?" The clerk shrugged. "Who knows? Could have been anybody. Elvis signed thousands of these things. Probably didn't mean nothing special to him. Just part of the job, right? Sign, smile, move on to the next person. Maybe," Elvis said quietly. "Or maybe each one meant something." The clerk laughed. "You're a romantic, huh?" "Nah, man. When you're signing hundreds of autographs a day, they all blur together. Trust me, Elvis Presley wasn't sitting there thinking about the deep meaning of each signature." Elvis handed the album back. "How much would you take for it?" The clerk's eyes narrowed slightly as he looked Elvis up and down, taking in the plain clothes, the working man appearance. "Like I said, $550. But honestly, buddy, no offense, but I don't think this is really in your price range. I got serious collectors interested in this piece. What if I really wanted it?" Elvis pressed. "Then you'd need to come back with $550 cash." The clerk put the album back in the case and locked it. "Plus, I'd need to verify you're not just some punk who's going to turn around and damage it. This is a serious collector's item we're talking about here." Elvis smiled, but there was something sad about it. "What if I told you I could get it for free?" The clerk laughed outright. "Yeah, and I'm Colonel Tom Parker. Look, man, I get it. Elvis stuff is expensive, but that's because it's valuable. Supply and demand, you know. Not everybody can afford the good stuff. I'm serious, Elvis said. I wouldn't have to pay a dime for that album. Never have, never will. The clerk's expression shifted from amused to irritated. All right, buddy. I don't know what you're trying to pull here, but if you're not buying anything, I got work to do. Elvis reached into his back pocket and pulled out his wallet. The clerk watched with crossed arms, clearly expecting him to either prove he had the money or embarrass himself trying. Instead, Elvis pulled out his driver's license and placed it on the counter right next to where the clerk was standing. Take a look, Elvis said quietly. The clerk glanced at the license, then did a double take. His eyes went wide. He looked at the ID, then at Elvis, then back. The cigarette fell from his lips. No way, he whispered. You're him. Elvis smiled gently. Oh my God, I just told Elvis Presley he couldn't afford. His face went red. I'm so sorry, Mr. Presley. Hey, it's all right, Elvis said, his voice calm and kind. You didn't know. That's the whole point of dressing down, right? Sometimes I like to just be a regular person. But I said those things about your music, about Hollywood. And I told you that you didn't think about the autographs, that they didn't mean anything. The clerk looked like he might actually cry. Elvis picked up the license and put it back in his wallet. You know what? You weren't wrong about some of that. Hollywood did change things. And yeah, when you're signing hundreds of autographs, sometimes they do blur together. He paused, looking back at the locked case. But not this one. I remember this one now. You do. The clerk's voice was barely a whisper. Yeah, that signature right there. I signed that in 1957, but not after the Ed Sullivan Show. It was after a concert in Tupelo, Mississippi, my hometown. There was this kid, couldn't have been more than 16, waiting by the stage door in the pouring rain. Everyone else had gone home, but he stayed. He had this album clutched to his chest like it was the most valuable thing in the world, trying to keep it dry under his jacket. When I came out, he didn't scream or jump around like the others usually did. He just looked at me with these serious eyes and said, Mr. Presley, would you sign this? My daddy's dying of cancer, and your music is the only thing that makes him smile anymore. The clerk was completely still, hanging on every word. I took that album, and I remember my hand was shaking a little because this kid's eyes were so earnest, so full of hope that somehow my signature was going to make his daddy feel better. I signed it, and I wrote something on the back, too. Something about music being medicine for the soul. Elvis's voice got quieter. 2 weeks later, I got a letter from that same kid. His daddy had passed away, but he was holding that album when he went. The kid said it gave his father peace. The clerk's eyes were glistening now. I didn't know. The estate sale, they didn't tell me. How would they know? Elvis said gently. Stories don't always travel with the objects. But that's okay. That album did what it was supposed to do. It helped somebody when they needed it. Now it's just a record again, waiting for the next chapter. There was a long silence in the shop. Outside, cars passed by on Beale Street. People went about their business completely unaware of what was happening in this small record store. Finally, the clerk spoke. Would you want to buy it? I'd give it to you, of course. I couldn't possibly charge you for your own signature. Elvis shook his head. Nah, you keep it. Sell it to that collector from New York if you want. Get your $600, but maybe he pulled out a pen from the counter. Maybe you got another album in here I could sign. Something you could sell for even more. The clerk practically ran to the back of the store and returned with 3 different Elvis albums, his hands shaking so badly he almost dropped them. These, sir. Any of these, all of these, whatever you want. Elvis took his time with each one, signing them carefully, adding little messages and the date to Charlie's records. Keep the music alive. EP June 17th, 1965 on one. Sometimes the best things in life are free. Elvis Presley on another. The real value isn't in the signature, it's in the song. EP 1965 on the third. When he finished, he handed them back. There you go. 3 more pieces of history for your collection. The clerk was actually crying now, not even trying to hide it. Mr. Presley, I don't know what to say. Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm sorry for stop apologizing, Elvis said, putting a hand on the young man's shoulder. You were just doing your job, protecting something valuable. That's good. That shows you care about what you do. Besides, you gave me a gift today, too. I did. You reminded me why I sign autographs in the first place. Not because they're going to be worth money someday, but because in that moment, they might mean something to somebody. They might bring a little joy or a little comfort or a little hope that's worth more than $500 any day. Elvis started toward the door, then paused and turned back. And hey, for what it's worth, you weren't completely wrong about Hollywood. Sometimes I do miss those early days, but that doesn't mean the journey wasn't worth taking. The clerk stood behind the counter, holding those 3 albums like they were made of glass, tears still streaming down his face. Mr. Presley, can I ask you one more thing? Sure. That kid from Tupelo, the one whose daddy died, did you ever hear from him again? Elvis smiled, but there was a sadness in it. No, but I think about him sometimes. I think about all the people whose lives I've touched without even knowing it. That's the strange thing about fame. You become part of people's stories, but you never get to read the whole book. After Elvis left, the clerk stood in that empty shop for nearly an hour just staring at those 3 signed albums. He never did sell them. Instead, he hung them on the wall behind the counter where they stayed until he retired 40 years later. And every time someone asked about them, he'd tell this story. About the day Elvis Presley walked into his shop and taught him that the real value of anything isn't in its price tag, but in the human connection behind it. As for the original album, the one in the locked case, the collector from New York did buy it for $600. But before he shipped it out, the clerk did something Elvis would have appreciated. He wrote down the story, the real story about the dying father and the son in Tupelo, and he included it with the album because Elvis was right. Stories should travel with the objects. They're what give them meaning. To this day, Charlie's record still exists on Beale Street, now run by the original clerk's daughter. And if you ask her about the 3 Elvis albums hanging on the wall behind the counter, protected by glass and carefully preserved, she'll tell you this story. Not about the one worth $600, but about the 3 that are priceless because they came with a lesson about humility, generosity, and the true value of fame. Elvis Presley walked out of that record store the same way he walked in. Quietly, without fanfare, just another person on Beale Street. But he left behind something more valuable than any signed album. A reminder that the most important autographs we give in life aren't written in ink. They're written in how we treat people. When we think nobody important is watching. If this story moved you, hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. Share it with someone who needs a reminder that kindness and humility matter more than fame or fortune. Have you ever had an encounter with someone famous who turned out to be completely different than you expected? Let us know in the comments below. And don't forget to ring that notification bell for more incredible true stories about the legends of